The phone call that changed everything in the Cook family didn't sound like an alarm at first. It was Friday morning, August 17th, 2012, and it was just after 6:30. Vicky Cook picked up. It was her daughter Deanna, her firstborn, calling as part of their prayer group. The conversation was normal, blessed, grounded in faith. They hung up. "Bye, Mama," Deanna said, and Vicky replied, "Goodbye, Diana." She would think about that later. She never said goodbye. It was always, "See you later," or "Talk to you soon." But she said goodbye. The second call was supposed to come at 10 a.m. when Deanna was on her way to her job at the car dealership. That call never came. By 1 p.m., Deanna's two daughters, Ania and Anaya, who were staying with their aunt, were expecting her to drop off some money. Anaya was getting her hair done for school. Deanna was a no-show. By Sunday, with no word and a missed church service, a family non-negotiable. The unease in Vicky Cook's stomach had hardened into a block of pure, cold dread. After the service, she gathered her daughter Cartha and her two granddaughters. They drove to Deanna's house on Crimson Court. This was the house Deanna had worked so hard for. After 2 divorces, after all the running, she'd finally found a street that felt like peace. Kids on bikes, flowers in the gardens, doors left open. It felt like a castle to her girls. This was where they would be settled. This was where they would be safe. They pulled up at 1:35 p.m. The first thing they saw was water. It was coming from under the garage door, a steady trickle that ran into the street and down the gutter. They heard her dog barking, a frantic, persistent sound, and then the smell hit them. Close to the door, it was a sweet, dreadful odor that spoke of something terribly wrong inside a home. Vicky called 911 right there in the driveway. "My daughter has been missing since Friday," she told the operator. The response was bureaucratic, a checklist. "Have you called the hospitals? The jails?" The operator then told her something that froze her blood. Police had already been to this address on the 17th. They'd come for a call from inside the house, but no one answered the door. They left. That was the day Deanna vanished. Vicky, her voice now tight with panic, begged for the police to come back to help them get inside. The operator's refusal was calm, firm. "Police can't help you get in the house. You have to do this first." Cartha looked at her mother. She knew that tone. With people you're close to, you just know. She told her mom to stand back. She was going to kick the door in. The back door gave way, and the smell poured out, thick and assaulting. The floor was flooded. Cartha hesitated, fear rooting her to the spot. But Anya, Deanna's teenage daughter, was banging on the front door. They opened it for her, and she marched in without a second's hesitation. They all followed in a single grim line. Vicky, still on the phone with 911, narrating the nightmare. The house was a ruin, water everywhere, up to their ankles in some places. Doors were damaged, furniture was askew. It was cold and wet and wrong. They sloshed towards Deanna's bedroom. The door to her bathroom was shut, the obvious source of the running water. Vicky pushed the bedroom door open, and it literally fell off its hinges. The room was trashed. She pushed open the bathroom door, and there was her daughter. Deanna Antoinette Cook was floating face down in the bathtub. The taps were still running. She was only in her underwear. The water around her had a pinkish red tint. Her skin was peeling, bloated, burnt. She had been dumped into scalding water. Cartha moved to turn the taps off, a human instinct to stop the waste, to stop this one small, ongoing wrong. Vicky screamed for her not to touch anything. This was a crime scene. Vicky would later say that in that moment, all she could do was lean on God to give her the strength not to take her own life right there. As they stood in that flooded bathroom, the truth was already forming on their lips. Vicky screamed it into the phone, into the damp, foul air. "He did it! He said he was going to do it, and he did it!" They didn't need a detective to tell them. They knew. It was Deanna Patrick, Deanna's ex-husband, the man she had gotten a restraining order against, the man she had moved houses to escape, the man who had threatened to kill her, her daughters, her mother. He had finally made good on his promise. Deanna Patrick, known as Red, was 35 years old. His relationship with Deanna had been terrible from the start, but she had a heart that believed in redemption. She thought she could help him, fix him. The red flags were there, but she said yes when he proposed in 2008. He was, by every account, the worst of the worst, a constant cycle of jail, release, violence, and threats. After Deanna filed for divorce and got that restraining order, it became a useless piece of paper. He found her. He harassed her. He abused her. Once, police had to taser him right off of her in the middle of an attack. He threatened to kill everyone in her life. She moved again and again, a desperate game of hide and seek with a predator. Her family knew the surface of her fear, but Deanna held back the full depth, the daily terror. Just 3 days before she was killed, her frustration with a system that wouldn't save her boiled over onto social media. She posted about a stalker, about her fear of a break-in, and she made one final desperate call for help. Not to a friend, but to the city of Dallas, to 911. The call came in at 8:23 a.m. on August 17th. The operator, Deanna Hopkins, answered. "Dallas 911, this is Deanna. What is your emergency?" What followed was over 10 minutes of pure, unadulterated horror, a recording that would later be played in a hushed courtroom. Deanna, from the very first seconds, is screaming for help. She identifies her attacker immediately, first by his nickname, Red. Red is in my house. Then by his full government name, Delveo Patrick. Delveo Patrick is in my house. You can hear the struggle, the thuds, the gasps. Her voice is raw with terror. She is begging for her life, and in the background, a male voice, mocking her, taunting her. "Where the police at? Huh? Where they at?" He tells her, point blank, "I'm gonna kill you." The sounds become wetter, more desperate. There's the sound of choking, gurgling, and then the sound of water, bubbling, as if someone's head is being held under. And then, silence. For 15 long minutes, the line is open, but all you can hear is Deanna's dog, barking and barking in the background, a loyal animal witnessing the unthinkable. Because Deanna called from a cell phone and not a landline, her exact address wasn't automatically populated. Deanna Hopkins had to find it. She searched the system, found a match from a previous call, and updated the dispatch note with the house number on Crimson Court. She added the word urgent. According to protocol, a call like this, a domestic violence in progress, should have been a priority one, the highest level. It should have had lights and sirens. Instead, it was logged as a priority 2. The critical details of the attack, the name of the assailant, the sounds of a murder in progress, were not relayed to the officers en route. They were told they were responding to a domestic disturbance. One of the 2 officers later stated they didn't receive the updated address with the urgent tag until they were already at the scene. Their response was not that of men racing to save a life. On their way to Crimson Court, their patrol car stopped, twice. Once to check on an unrelated burglar alarm call, and another stop at a 7-Eleven to get bottles of water. They arrived at Deanna's house nearly 50 minutes after her call began. They knocked. They reported hearing a dog bark. They saw the blinds were closed. No one answered the door. They left. They assumed she was gone or didn't want to answer. They never checked the back. They never looked through all the windows. They never tried to force the door. They got back in their car and drove away, leaving a woman who had just fought for her life for 10 minutes on the phone with her city to die alone in a bathtub. The trial of Delveo Patrick began 2.5 years later, in 2015. The family had waited through delays, their grief suspended in a torturous legal limbo. In the courtroom, the state aimed to preempt the defense's narrative. They knew the attack would come on Deanna's character. They brought up her past struggles with mental health and substance use. They acknowledged the one time she had fought back against Delveo, an act a previous judge had rightly called self-defense. They wanted the jury to see everything, to take the poison out of the defense's playbook before they could inject it. And then there was the tattoo. While awaiting trial, Delveo Patrick had gotten new ink on his leg. The prosecution presented it as a grotesque trophy. It depicted a woman who looked like Deanna, surrounded by flames, her mouth open in a silent scream, a permanent illustration of her final moments in that scalding bathtub. The defense, of course, argued it was just a tattoo of a rapper, but the heart of the trial was the testimony. Deanna Cook took the stand and relived the moment she found her daughter. She described the water, the smell, the shadow behind the curtain. Her anguished cry, "He said he was going to do it, and he did it," echoed in the quiet room. People in the gallery wept. Delveo Patrick sat at the defense table, showing nothing, no reaction. He looked bored. When Deanna's daughters gave their victim impact statements, he laughed. He smirked. He even raised his middle finger at them as he was let out. A former prosecutor on the case, Heath Harris, would later say, "I've prosecuted the worst of the worst, and I've defended the worst of the worst, and he is one of the worst of the worst." The defense's strategy was as cruel as it was predictable. They blamed Deanna Cook for her own death. Defense attorney Roger Lennox claimed the 911 call was the hallucination of a woman high on PCP, suffering from bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. A forensic psychologist called by the defense talked about Deanna's psychological autopsy and her self-destructive lifestyle choices. They said she might have imagined the attack, that perhaps she'd passed out in the bath. But under cross-examination, that same psychologist admitted she heard nothing on the 911 call that indicated Deanna was delusional. She was responding to a very real, very present threat. The prosecutor, Trey Stock, dismantled the argument with cold fury. The idea she is hallucinating her husband, saying multiple times, "I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you," is preposterous. She didn't hallucinate that. I heard it, you heard it, Delveo heard it, and he said it. The state presented witness after witness who had seen Delveo's abuse. And then, a former Dallas County jail nurse took the stand. She testified that she overheard Delveo Patrick tell another inmate, plainly, "I killed that bitch." After a week of harrowing evidence, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours and 20 minutes. The verdict was guilty. Delveo Patrick was convicted of first-degree murder. The cause, homicidal violence, including drowning. The punishment phase was its own theater of the absurd. Prosecutors asked for life. The defense suggested he could be rehabilitated in as little as 5 years. His own mother took the stand, pleading for mercy for her son, mentioning his children, his ailing father. The jury gave him 85 years. It wasn't life, but it was damn near close. He would be eligible for parole when he was 65 years old. Vicky Cook said he was a person with no feelings, no soul, born of the devil. But the trial of Delveo Patrick was only one half of the story. The other trial was of the system that failed Deanna Cook. Her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Dallas and its police department. It alleged gross negligence, inadequate training, and painfully, discrimination. Her sister posed the question that hung over everything. Would they have stopped at 7-Eleven if it had been someone in Highland Park? Referring to one of the wealthiest, whitest neighborhoods in Dallas, the lawsuit wound its way through the courts for years. But in 2019, a federal judge dismissed all claims. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear an appeal. The official reckoning was internal. The 911 operator who took Vicky's call on the day of the discovery was fired. The operator who took Deanna's call, Tanita Hopkins, was initially given a 10-day suspension. She broke her silence in an interview, describing a call center that was short-staffed and overwhelmed. She said she never heard the choking, the drowning sounds. She believed she had followed her training. She carried the weight, rightly or wrongly, of being the last voice Deanna Cook heard that wasn't her killer's. The city was shamed into change. Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings launched a major campaign against domestic violence, saying publicly, "We all failed her. The system failed her. The mayor failed her." The Dallas 911 Center underwent a massive overhaul. They hired more call takers. They implemented new training, specifically prioritizing domestic violence calls. They now boast that 90% of calls are answered within 3 seconds. But for the Cook family, reform was a cold comfort. Their foundation was gone. Their strength, Deanna, had been murdered. So they built something new from their grief. They founded Diana's Voice, a nonprofit organization. Her daughters Anya and Anaya, who were just children when they lost their mother, grew up to be its ambassadors. Anaya became a professional volleyball player. Ania graduated and headed to university. They started a scholarship fund. They run a program called Breaking the Barriers to support families trapped in cycles of abuse. They use their mother's name and her story as a shield for others. Vicky Cook, when asked what she would say to Delveo Patrick, found a strength that defies the darkness. She said, I hate that you did what you did, but I forgive you because I can't make it to heaven with hatred of you in my heart. Deanna Antoinette Cook wanted to be a star. In the worst possible way, she became one, a blazing, tragic signal flare that exposed the deadly cracks in the system. Her voice was silenced in a bathtub on Crimson Court, but through her family's relentless love and their refusal to let her death be just another statistic, Diana's voice still speaks. It is a voice that now asks hard questions, demands accountability, and reaches out a hand to the next woman who is whispering, "I'm afraid he's going to kill me." It is a voice that insists, "Hear me. This time, hear me."